So I've reviewed the instructions again for the switches, and it's time for me to move on to the cable ties. And how he's doing this is in a bit from the end. And then going diagonal across the switch body like this, like he shows in the picture here. So we'll get one of those just starting to snug up. I'll bring in one from this side. Again, being careful to get underneath. The bottom alignment PC bottom alignment little PCB adapter, and then of course over the top of the and we'll begin to snug these up. I'm guessing we'll want a couple more out on the end, which is why he supplied these. That can go under. That's probably not a good place. We'll come in one. Definitely a little bit fiddly, but that's okay. Get some tension on that. I want to use a little bit of tape on these end ones to hold them in place. We'll come down here to this end and work underneath the bottom alignment PCB, and we're above, of course, the top one. I actually ran this one through. I guess we can begin snugging these up. Now you can see here, all these switches here are laid over at, they're not square. That's better. All the switches were kind of leaning to the left here, so they weren't in 90 degrees square. I can see I've got one at a different height here than the others. So I'm going to try to work them all down to the same height above the board. I think I need to get a couple more wire ties here. These are, as you can see, several of them I'm having to slide down more because they've kind of floated up. Yeah, a little bit fiddly. We don't want to make another pass through there that way. What do they look like from that side? Again, I've got some that are higher than others. So I think this is just going to be whole lot of kind of adjusting around. I think I'm going to grab a couple more wire ties for in the middle here. Let me grab them. These will be long enough. These are a little bit. I'm going to get some smaller ones, some that are narrower. I think they'll work better. Digging for wire ties. And I've just got a loose box full of random wire ties here. Oops. It's actually caught up under a switch body. Yeah, the wider wire ties wouldn't have worked. They would have caught up under the switch bodies and not directly up against the PCB, which wouldn't have been good because it would have been pulling against the switch bodies rather than see some that don't. They all look to be leaning a little bit to the left here. So apologies, I had a phone call that I had to take. So I'm going to cinch these up a little more if I can. I've put a slightly larger tip in my soldering station. These end switches will need to be held in place a little bit better. I can see that that's not completely flush across there. Let's just see how. Oh, it's pretty close. Of course, that end switch keeps drifting up. So I will be, I think, soldering a couple of these, checking for level, trying to get them all about the same distance from the PCB. Some are a little bit lower than others. Just shifting them up a bit. So I think what I'll do here is, they look square to me overall. I will solder a couple to get it kind of captured in place and just kind of gently work through it. So I put a little bit bigger tip on the soldering pencil. I'm sure you can overheat these and damage them. It's talked about quite extensively in the manual. I'm going to hit the center pin first. Actually, I didn't want to do the outside one, and I just did. I wanted to leave it loose. Okay. It looks fairly flush. Didn't mean to solder that one first. I wanted to be on the second one in. And the second one in over here. Now just kind of looking at height. So I think I can hit the pushing some of these up so that the tips are flush. Oh, sad little dog downstairs. Oh yeah, this one right here is really high. See that one's a little low. Never going to get this perfect, but then I don't expect to. It's certainly better than it was. I will hit a few more, check it again, hit a few more. I'm not following as closely the instructions as he had this written up. We're wet the pencil, heat up the PCB, then when the solder flows, move on to the pin in the switch. So if I have some switch failures because of my soldering technique, that's on me. I don't expect to. My dwell time here is pretty short. It looks pretty level. I'm going to go ahead and hit that end one. And then look across the ends here for height. Sad little doggy downstairs crying. I'm going to come in a few more switches. A little longer dwell time than I wanted on that one. See, I think that's It's actually looking really good overall. I think I'm safe to walk along the rest of them. I'm just soldering the center pin at this point. That way there's only one pin soldered. I can come back and make adjustments if I need to. I suspect when I take the wire ties off and get the little spacer moved out of the way, that a couple of them might not be as centered or square as perfectly as I'd like. I could use a little bit more solder there. So I've tacked in the center pin on every switch. Everything looks square. The spacing above the PCB looks good. I'm going to cut the wire ties at this point and remove them, assuming I can find the side cutters. See that white switch, I've still got the brace underneath up high. It needs to be moved down. So that the bat handles get released. Shifting finally. Oh, didn't want to drop it, but I did. I'm trying to get it worked down. The white one's just not in line with the others, and I'm not sure why. Here that look like they need to be shifted just a tiny bit. So I'm going to see if I can shift him forward just a bit. I think it's that one. Could be moved a tiny bit if I can get it to move. Never going to get this perfect, but I can get it as visually as close as I can. I still think that white one. Whether I'm actually shifting the switch body or not is debatable. It's pretty close. let's lay out the template. Toggle up. They're hitting the alignment guide. Oh, it shifted up while I was manipulating things. And drop the screwdriver. And pick it up with a big ball of tape stuck to it. See if I can get that guide to slide down. Oh, poor little doggy down there, just a crying and a crying. So red toggle, purple, purple, purple toggle, red, 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 purple, 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 red, 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 purple, 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 red, red, red. Lift up for lamp test. Push down, temporary, push up, momentary red, push up, oh, push down, momentary purple, push down, toggle red, push down, toggle purple, push down, momentary red. So they continue to all appear to be in the same, or in the correct places. They all seem to work. The alignment is good enough. The board's gotten rather heavy with all those installed. It's no surprise. And little man is just down there crying away. The leads on these didn't look tarnished at all, so they're probably fairly new switches. I know there was some comment about perhaps needing to clean the switches. I didn't see any need to, based on what I saw. Oh, he sounds like he's dying down there. I tried to get him to come up with me and he refused, and now he's going to be noisy about it. Hopefully the camera's not picking him up. Don't like that solder joint. I'm going to add a bit more solder. Trying to keep the dwell time down. Dwell time is the amount of time you spend actually heating the component to be soldered. If you want enough dwell time, you get a good solder flow, but not so much dwell time you damage the component or lift a PCB trace. I definitely agree with the part of the manual about do one row of pins at a time. That way the switch can cool off, then you come back to the next switch pin, and so you're not getting a lot of heat buildup internally in the switch by just soldering all three of its pins in a row. I think that's good advice. He's just down there moaning and groaning, unhappy little boy. The alignment on that outer red one still looks good. Now I will walk the set of pins. Continues to be a nice little project, well designed. Like the kit. Assembly's pretty straightforward. You know, the switches are a bit finicky, getting them aligned well and making sure the right switch is in the right place, etc. But, you know, component locations, the correct ones in the correct places in any kit is something you have to pay attention to. It's been a fun build so far. Minute or two here, we'll get this done. We'll get the Pi back on, get it powered up, and do the tests again. I can feel the heat. My fingertips on the switches I've soldered. Yeah. Come unhooked. I probably don't clean the soldering pencil tip as often as I should. Didn't look as nice as I'd have liked. I'm not going to resolder the center pins unless I absolutely have to. There's a couple that do look rather dull that I might retouch. Although honestly, for most of these, is solidly as the pins were pushed through the holes in the board, and I'm not going to spend mega hours toggling switches. It might be safer just to call it good enough. Oh, that all looks reasonable. I've got the Pi laying over here. We will hook it up. I've got no bits of metal or anything that's going to sit down against here when I plug in the power. Let's plug in the power lead and see what we get. It gets booted a bit here, all the LEDs should come on. Something's not happy. Oh, there it is. Okay, it's up and booted. Now lamp test should light all the lamps, and it does. I should be able to do a halt, a continue, and have it continue running. Continue. Let's hold it. Let's load address all zeros, which is what we should have saw happen there. Let's load address 1, load address 2. You can see the address bit moving across as I test it. This is testing each one of the address switches, is doing its thing. The switch looks like it's a little bit rotated. Nothing I can do about it now. I'm not going to spend significant time trying to loosen it up and twist it a bit. It's in as well as it's in. So A20, A21. So let's load addresses of all 0. And let's put in a bit pattern and deposit it into memory. And I should be able to do a deposit. I half expected the address auto increment there, and it didn't. And I don't know if it does or not. I guess I didn't deposit before, or did I? Load address again. So that switch is working. Load address 0. Examine. And there's the bit pattern I wrote in. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. I would expect a 0 2 4 6 8. This LED doesn't seem to be counting up in binary the way I would expect it to. These 5 definitely are. Why is a 0? Is this because it's... oh, I don't remember. I'm going to assume that's completely normal. So there's data paths. Let's load the address back to 0. Deposit something again. Deposit. Deposit. Load address. Examine the next address. Did I not get? I didn't pay enough attention to the switches. Let's redeposit here. Load the address back to 0. Examine the next address. There it is. Okay. And we just went back and loaded the default program 0, which is the blinky lights program. I think at this point I've tested enough to believe the switches are working. Enable halt. Enable halt. I don't remember how to single step. I'd have to look in the manual. I'm going to assume it's working. We can get the LED alignment panel back on. A couple of these kind of got moved around due to handling. Very nice. So I think I'm generally pleased with how I got the switches in. It could have been better. They're a little bit. They're pretty consistent across here. There's a little bit of waver over here that I guess I could have fought a little harder to correct, but I didn't. It kind of is what it is. It'll look fine, I think, when it's in the case. you know, perfection is always an option, but never an option. So let's see here. What was the way to shut it down? Enable halt. I believe it was enable halt, and then click the address switch, and that would tell it to shut down. Pull the power. While we're here, I want to remove this cover again because I got to put some screws in. I think it's time to permanently attach the Raspberry Pi. We've got the hardware box here. We'll do that, and then we'll wrap this video up. Oh, poor little doggy. He's just down there just having a horrible time. You can hear him just being super sad. I have to go downstairs and bring him up. First thing I gotta find is that little, oh, geez, dropping stuff. A little Phillips that I can get into those nylon standoffs. Doesn't need to be super tight. But that gets the Pi attached. I've got plenty of gap over here. The tape is in place and stayed in place to help insulate things. I think I'm okay. I don't think tightening these screws down. Cut through the tape. Apply power again, let it come up. Make sure tightening the Pi down didn't do something bad. I do wish that white switch was a little better centered. It's twisted a bit as well. I might actually attempt to rework that one. There it goes. I think we're good. So I will wrap the switch work up with this. And call it done. And I think next will be really the final assembly of the case. So I'll see you in the next video.